You're listening to Wild Things and Wild Places. In this episode, we bring you audio from the first ever Wyoming Sportsperson Conservation Forum, hosted by Governor Gordon in collaboration with Game and Fish. We'll spotlight Joshua Coursey as he moderates a panel celebrating our rich hunting heritage. Stay tuned for insights and discussions from this landmark event.
Thanks all of you for taking some time to come spend with us discussing some of what I certainly believe are the most important issues facing our state and some of the things that are pretty common talk in coffee shops and bars around Wyoming. I just wanted to say welcome before we get kicked into this discussion. I'll kick it over to Governor for his welcome.
Well, it's amazing with this room being full. It, I think, is a real reassurance of what is important in Wyoming is our outdoors, our wildlife. And if I might, and it's just wonderful to have you all here. And Dan, thank you so much for this opportunity. What a great facility you have here. And there's just great people in this room. But I was on the way up here, I was thinking about a quote from T.A. Larson, who was a preeminent Wyoming historian. And he wrote two books, one just called Wyoming, which was published in about 1980. Almost no part of the country has the opportunity now facing Wyoming to demonstrate what America could have been if planners and developers had traded some short-term profits for long-term gains. It is possible that Wyoming could emerge from the primitive isolation, but in such a way that its greatest values are preserved and its old way of life left for those who choose to follow it. Development does not necessarily have to be a story of unmitigated, unrelieved disaster. While it appears that the people of Wyoming are going to have to sacrifice, in part, some of the things they have valued most, there is still hope that much can be salvaged. Perhaps it is not yet time to grieve. Wyoming still has enough of its old magic to stir the blood of visitor and native alike, but surely it is time to reflect on the joy that Whistler savored and ponder whether what the world wants from Wyoming is worth more than what Wyoming already offers the world. That was 1980. Things don't change a lot in Wyoming. And I grew up in a little town, KC, where things still are back in the 1880s. So,
thank you for your welcome, Governor. I did want to start this off by talking a little bit about how we got here. And many of you may not know, but the Good Idea Ferry does really like Governor Gordon's office and really likes his vehicle, likes his airplane. The Good Idea Ferry is around with Governor Gordon a lot. But anyway, this was one of those times when actually the Good Idea Ferry dropped a really good idea in his lap. And he said, you know what, this is only a couple months ago. He said, we really need to bring Wyoming people together in a sportsman kind of a forum and talk about all these cool things. So tell me a little bit, Governor, about what your thoughts were when you envisioned this whole idea of bringing all these folks together today.
I actually remember some of the ideas coming from being in the middle of the thoroughfare with you and Lee last year, talking about the things that mattered most to us about Wyoming. And I think everybody here shares those reflections. It's about the outdoors, it's about wildlife, it's about open spaces, and it's about coming together. I see Jim Nyman, my friend there, just had the Old West Turkey hunt, and the people that gathered there, that came there, that said, this part of Wyoming, this state is the most remarkable place, and it's just good people, they care about things. And in this national discussion that we're having now, it's election season, I know, but here's the thing. At the national level, we're talking about a lot of stuff, and we talk about it in terms of this posture or that posture. Here in Wyoming, when it comes to the outdoors, when it comes to our wildlife, when it comes to our natural resources, we care about the detail, not the posture, the detail. And I think what our conversation was is how can we make sure that we engage with sportsmen and understand how important that whole topic of what do we do about our wonderful state, how do we make sure that we keep those values we care about most and make sure that our state is great for those that come after. And let's have that conversation with our sportsmen.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember a lot of that discussion too about talking about the what and the how. And oftentimes the debate and the contentiousness comes around those two issues. But really, wildlife conservation is a unifying issue in Wyoming because almost everybody agrees at the end of the day on the why. The why is the unifying issue for our state, why this is so important to our quality of life and to the major impactors to our economy and influencers on our economy. We've narrowed it down to a handful, our hunting heritage and talking about the why, wildlife crossings, mule deer, invasives and feral horses, wildlife habitats and connectivity. Talk a little bit, Governor, about why you thought those were particularly important for this first forum of this nature.
As you said, there's just so many topics that we could talk about. And it is so exciting to see as many people here that care as much as they do. Wyoming has, and I think many of the people in this room know that, we've led the way in so many respects. I see that we have representatives from the tribes here. When you think about the Eastern Shoshones, they made the winds roadless well before anybody in the federal government thought about it. They've made that case. We were able to recover thanks to the game and fish, the black-footed ferret. We've done a phenomenal job on sage grouse. Really, nobody else has done it the same way we have. You're the first to talk about migration corridors. And so to continue that leadership at a national level, and let me back up for a second, because one of the things that I get most concerned about, the conversation about conservation has changed so dramatically over my lifetime. And I can remember my dad came here in 1932 and was out at the CM Ranch. And Charlie Moore, who owned it at the time, was one of the very first conservationists. His papers on conservation are down in the museum in Denver. And the people I grew up with on the ranch, I see Jim McGagnon here. Jim, I'm sure you would say the same thing. All of the ranchers were about, what do we do to make sure that we protect this landscape, that we understand the value of what we have here? So for Wyoming, I think it's critical that we emphasize the importance of understanding what happens on the ground, the science, and not be lured by the temptation of let's just take a posture. This is bad. This is quote unquote conservation. And that means that we can't do anything else here. And so these 5 topics, I think, were a good entrance into this conversation.
Just based on what we see here today, we're going to have the opportunity to replicate this in the future and be able to talk about more of these really important issues in Wyoming. I did see that we have, I saw Representative Byron, Representative Winter, Senator Hicks. I hope I didn't miss any of the other legislators in the room, but it made me think how important, from your perspective, is the manner in which we have these conversations around wildlife policy and being respectful and constructive when we craft wildlife policies, both for the executive branch and the legislative branch and for all those folks that have inputs into those processes.
I think it's absolutely essential. And if there is, as I started to say, one of the things that can tie us together is our respect and our love for the outdoors. We may not all agree, but I think it's those conversations. And as I looked at the guest list here today, the wide variety of attitudes and opinions on this, it's just wonderful to have people engaged in this conversation. I think I saw Ted Carasotti was going to be in the guest. I don't know if Ted's here, but Ted has a wonderful book, Blood Ties, he wrote a long time ago. But I always loved it because he talks about 3 hunting adventures, one clubbing seals in Iceland, and another one with a trophy hunt in Russia, and another one, his elk hunt in Jackson. All of those are interesting because he points out the uniqueness of each of those situations in a way that maybe you wouldn't have expected. It's really well written. But what I found best was this afterword in which he said, I've talked, and it's been a long time ago, so it's a paraphrase, but I've talked to a lot of lobbyists in D.C., and somebody who's really aggressive about deer actually knows nothing about the habitat, knows nothing about what deer look like, but just the concept this is important. And so if you start from that, we're not going to engage with another point of view. You're not going to get very far. But that's what's great about Wyoming. We see it on the ground here. We can talk about what the issues are. We can come to, I hope, agreement, as we have, on a number of very controversial topics, and we've really led the nation in doing that. I wish that DC would pay more attention to what we've been able to accomplish here.
I think one of the initiatives and the matters in which Wyoming led on migration corridors is a really good example of that. That was not an easy issue, and it was discussed and cussed for many years. And when you put together the right group of folks and brought them in the room, and we took the time to analyze all the science, the biological science, the social science, and the political science, we're able to come to a policy really, really works in Wyoming, and everybody else wants to replicate now. So I think that's one really good illustration out of a lot of different great initiatives that our state can lay claim to over the last several years. But it kind of chart the course for the day, Governor. What do you see for the day? What's your kind of message to these folks and what we want to get out of this day?
I'm here to learn, so it's awkward to be up here talking at you, and I apologize for that. But I think the opportunity to have those discussions, to figure out policy that we can move forward on, get some unique perspectives. And most especially, I think, for me, it's what are the things that are going to come out of this first conference that we can actually put in play, either at a policy level, at a legislative level, stuff I'd like to take to DC. We've already had a couple of really good inroads there. Working with Secretary Vilsack, we were able to, I think you were there for when we signed the agreement that finally recognized that private lands have a really important role for wildlife habitat, and that should be recognized as part of your resource. I think there are some other issues that maybe we can help inform what goes on from a policy standpoint. So my hope is that this will be productive, that people will engage, that people will come away more knowledgeable. And I hope, because it is a very full day, I hope nobody feels like the whole conversation has ended as of today. I hope it spurs more conversation and more direction, and frankly, more engagement for sportsmen on the political forum, because I think sportsmen have not been represented in a broader conversation about these topics, either on a national level or even globally.
And I think that's an excellent point, Governor. Talk to policymakers, they want to hear from sportsmen. And when they don't, they're left to make decisions without their input. Before we wrap this up and move on to the great panels we've got that'll probably be very interesting today, I did want to again thank the attendees here. And then we had a steering committee that worked hard on putting this together and arranging the panelists and all of the facilitators. Katie Cheesegrove, Josh Coursey, Lee Livingston, Joy Bannon, Jess Johnson, Tony Shonen, Chris McBarnes, Sarah Dorenzo, and Nish Gokhale all were on that group to help put this together. And then a lot of Game and Fish folks setting this all up and making sure that we all have a good day here.
Now, this is an exciting opportunity. I think it's historic. I think this certainly has a tremendous opportunity to build with great momentum in the future. And I have some stellar guests here as part of our panel today. The topic is celebrating our hunting heritage, perspectives on ethics, fair chase, and what hunting means to Wyoming. And you don't have to look far outside of the Cowboy State to see some of the assaults that are on our hunting heritage. And I found this clip to be quite profound that was recently published in a Colorado newspaper. And it says, "We are fundamentally part of our natural world. Death is part of life, and whether we choose to bear witness, we are part of that cycle. Our industrial food chain forces huge distances between a person at the point of consumption on one end and a life ending in death on the other. Hunters, farmers, foragers, gardeners, and others live close to the point of death, but we share equally in its necessity. As our society continues to grow, it is imperative that we consider the benefits of hunting and the importance of science-based wildlife management and policy-making decisions. Our wild things and wild places depend upon them." And I thought that was exceptionally well written. I think the statement speaks for itself. Joining me here this morning is Christina Peterson, Alex Livingston, and Charlie Booker. Christine has covered wildlife, the environment, and outdoor recreation in Wyoming and across the West for more than a decade. First at the Casper Star Tribune as a freelance journalist. She has since written about grizzly bears, wolves, elk, and insects for National Geographic, water law and persistence hunting for Outdoor Life, and chronic wasting disease, mule deer migration, and landlocked public land for High Country News. Her byline also has appeared in The Guardian, Outside, The New York Times, and The Atlantic. She writes regularly for Wildfile, is a contributing writer for Outdoor Life, and former president of the Outdoor Writers Association of America. When she's not reporting or writing from her home in Laramie, she can be found wandering the west with her husband, young daughter, and 2 Labradors. Alex Livingston is a 4th-generation resident of Cody, Wyoming. Growing up, she spent as much time as she could going to the mountains, riding horses, and hunting. Alex graduated from Cody High School in 2018 and promptly enrolled in the Northwest College in Powell, where she pursued a degree in conservation law enforcement. Alex graduated with honors and was Student of the Year. She has followed her father, Lee Livingston, to the mountains ever since she can remember and started working for him full-time in 2020. In 2021, Alex got her professional guide's license and was on track to reaching her goal of becoming an outfitter. She is currently managing the Livingston Outfitting Wilderness Hunting Camp located on the South Fork of the Shoshone River. At age of 24, Alex is the 3rd youngest person to receive a license from the Wyoming Board of Outfitters, and she is now preparing herself to be the next generation of Livingston Outfitting. Charlie Booker is a professional member of the Boone and Crockett Club and a consultant at Watershed Result. Charlie is dedicated to building a better world for people and for wildlife through coalition building and strategic advocacy in all levels of government. Charlie previously served in government relations and communication roles for the Wildlife Society, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and Michigan United Conservation Clubs. He worked in the executive office of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department on translating research findings into better governance, and a Boone and Crockett Club Wildlife Conservation Fellow at the University of Montana. Charlie holds undergraduate degrees in fisheries and wildlife conservation and public policy from Michigan State University, and a graduate degree in wildlife biology, public administration, and natural resource conflict resolution from the University of Montana. Please welcome our panelists today. And we would start with Christine.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Joshua, for such a great introduction. I'm excited to be here today and to sit with these really amazing folks and listen to all the rest of the talks today. I am going to chat a little bit about ethics. It's always an exciting one to dive into with a room full of hunters. So the last handful of years, I've been applying for late season cow elk tags around Laramie, where I moved back to a handful of years ago. Partly as an insurance policy for my family. My husband generally gets an elk in the fall, and it's in the freezer before winter, and everything's fine, and we can turn to birds. But also because who doesn't want an opportunity to hunt a cow elk in January in Laramie? I know I did. And this year, Josh, my husband, did not get an elk, so I got that coveted opportunity. And there I was in January in the just wide open BLM section, looking at a group of cow elk, 50, 60 head elk, probably about 800 yards away. Just a gentle 45-mile-an-hour wind kissing my cheeks. And I'm crawling, and I think, got my rifle over my shoulder. If I crawl at these elk, who clearly have seen me for a long ways, for 700 yards, maybe they won't think I'm a threat. Maybe I just look weird and small and awkward and not stealthy at all, and it'll be fine, and I'll get close enough to shoot one. And so that's what I do. So I crawl 100 yards, 200 yards, 300 yards. I stop periodically to pull cactus spines out of my hands. I look at the poop I'm crawling through, and I keep crawling. And I get 400 yards away, then I get 300 yards away, and then my rangefinder works, and that's exciting. Then I get about 250 yards away, and then 230 yards, and they're getting a little nervous now. And I think, okay, should I shoot? Should I shoot at 230 yards? Most people guessing Alex is good at 230 yards. I am not. I don't think. I've sighted in at 200. I have a tight grouping at 200. I told myself, don't shoot farther than 200, Christine. So I think I'm just going to go a little bit farther. So I crawl a little bit more, and then they do what cow elk do, and they throw their heads up, and they saunter. They don't saunter far. maybe 400, 500 yards. Okay, we got to take 2. So I crawl some more. Another 100 yards, another 200 yards, more cactus, more poo. And I get about 250 yards. And then off they go again. We do this another couple times before they finally decide whatever this crawling thing is, we don't like it anymore, we don't want to play its game anymore, and they take off and they're gone. And so I stand up and I brush myself off and I turn back for the long walk to the truck. And I'm partly berating myself because 230 yards, come on, you could have done it. It could have been fine. You don't have milk in the freezer. You don't have a lot more days before this season ends. Also, this isn't fun. This is cold. This is really cold. But also I'm proud of myself because I said, don't shoot over 200 yards. And I didn't. And the thing is, I didn't grow up hunting. I grew up really uncomfortable with hunting in Casper. I had a neighbor that lived across the street. He hunted. And one of my earliest memories is looking at a dead buck in his backyard as maggots crawled out of its eyeballs. And I tell you what, my brother and his kids and I did not eat the deer tacos we were served for dinner that night. We threw them over the fence. But then I got to college and I met a hunter, and I ignored that he was a hunter, and he ignored that I ignored that he was a hunter, and we were fine. And probably a year or two later, we weren't living in the same place, and we were chatting over MSN Instant Messenger, like you did 20 years ago. I killed a deer today. And I stopped and I looked at the computer and I banged out Bambi killer, and I slammed my computer and I didn't talk to him for 2 days. To be clear, I was not a vegetarian. I just had all this discomfort with hunting. And I thought, he's bloodthirsty and he's a trophy hunter and he's all these negative things that people who don't hunt think about hunting. And so we stayed together. And I became the outdoor reporter for the Star Tribune, and I started writing about hunting a lot, and I went hunting a lot, and I packed animals out, and I butchered animals in the garage, and I thought more about it. And somewhere along the way, I ran into this quote by Aldo Leopold, and it says, "A peculiar virtue in wildlife ethics is that the hunter ordinarily has no gallery to applaud or disapprove of his conduct. Whatever his acts, they are dictated by his own conscience rather than by a mob of onlookers." And that felt really true to me. And it really encompassed what I was hearing from other hunters, that there were times that they didn't take the shot and they had their own personal reasons for doing that. And that it also resulted in a lot of unfilled hunting licenses. But everybody's got, I assume everybody has an unfilled tag out here somewhere. And so then I got some stories, and there was the biologist who had a once-in-a-lifetime bighorn sheep tag, and he had a shot at a ram, and he knew it was probably going to be his only shot at a ram. But the place of that sheep was just dicey enough that he thought maybe it could work. I could shoot, it could walk the right direction, it could die in a decent place, I could get it out. Chances are a lot higher that I can't, and that it's not going to die in a good place, and I'm not going to be able to get the sheep out. Do I take that risk? And he decided, no, I don't take that risk. And so he left, and he had an unfilled bighorn sheep tag. Just a tough thing to sit with. And there's another guy that had a 6x6 elk bugling at 60 yards. He was pulled back, and he thought, is it really 60 yards? Or is it maybe 45 yards? I can't get my rangefinder out right now. Maybe I'm close enough. Maybe it'll be okay. Maybe I'll make it. And he ultimately decided, no. It's not, I don't feel good about it, I'm not going to do it. Dad had taught him that he could shoot at running animals. His dad had remarkable success getting down, killing, successfully killing animals that were running. And so he thought one day, I can do it. And he shot at a pronghorn, and it did not go well. And instead of going home and thinking, what could I have done differently? I could aim a little farther out. I could have tried it different like this. He said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. This, I can't. I'm not going to shoot at an animal that runs. And that became part of his core ethics. And I think that as we talk about regulations, which do give us some hard lines, right? They tell us some calibers, they tell us species, they tell us area, and that's important. And those regulations need to evolve, and they need to change. And I think we all are taking a hard look at things after the guy ran a wolf over with a snowmobile and paraded it around a bar in Daniel. And We've got a committee now that's looking at those and seeing what could change or what should change or what needs to change. And as technology evolves, just because we've got a rifle that can shoot at 1,000 yards, do we shoot across a canyon at an elk 600 yards away? Do we have a bow that says it's good to 100 yards? Do we take that 100-yard shot? Maybe some people can. I sure couldn't. But those are conversations that we need to have with ourselves. Even if we've hunted 30 years or 40 years or 2 years, they're decisions that we need to sit with and we need to talk to each other about. If we're hunters or if we're not hunters, we need to say, hey, what are you good to and why? What helped you make that decision for yourself? When do you decide that an animal can be retrieved or can't be retrieved? Where do you operate in that gray area? And I think that's the best way for us to respect the wildlife that clearly we all care so much about, which is why we're all sitting in this room. And it's also the best way for us to train that next generation. I've got a 7-year-old daughter who comes with me on most of my hunts. She's been with me when I've shot and when I haven't shot. And she's whispered, Mom, shoot. I've said, no, it's too far. And we've had to have those conversations with each other. And I don't know if she'll grow up to hunt or not, but I want that to be in her mind so that she can make those decisions for herself from a place of a deep ethical decision. I'm really excited to hear what Alex and Charlie have to say about their backgrounds. And I would just say, as we move forward, talk to each other, talk to me, tell me your stories or story ideas. I'd love to hear them. And before we go out this fall, check in with yourself and think about what you feel like you can and can't do. Thanks. You're up.
I guess I'm a little different than Christine. Since she started off later on in life, I grew up in this world. As I was introduced, I am Lee Livingston Skin. But I wanted to start off with this own personal story of mine of how my passion started. It was Halloween. I was in my little Belle princess dress, and I was tired of trick-or-treating. I must have been throwing a fit, and my mom's, come get your daughter, because I don't want her. And so my dad came and picked me up, and he took me to the lodge, and we walk inside, and there's all these mule deer hanging up. And you're 3 years old, you're curious, you want to know what's going on. And I'm like, Dad, what happened to these deer? And he's, we hunted them. We guided them, we guided our hunters, we got these deer. And I was like, do I get a hunt? And he said, yes. And I was like, do I get a gun? Yes. Then I was like, well, do I get bullets? He's, yes. Getting annoyed with the repetitive questions from his child. And I was like, who I'm in. And that's where just the start of it, just the tip of the iceberg. As I began to grow, I wanted to be involved in my dad's outfitting world, my own hunting world for a long time. There's been times where I would skip a Friday, go in on the weekends and help set up hunting camp, help set up cots, tables, whatever little kid could do. Get your free work somewhere, Dad. Am I right? And I just, wherever I could be involved. I remember another time, picked me up from the bus stop. Next day was picture day, and he was just like, do you want to go to picture day or do you want to go to hunting camp? Hunting camp. That is the correct answer always. And so I was fortunate to grow up to be sitting downstairs in my dad's barn watching his guides cape out these deer, and so they become these trophies for these guys that are about to be taking them home and everything. It's great. And so that's what I got to sit down there and I got to watch that. Later on, the teenage years, I think I shot my first antelope at 13. And so I got to start really figuring out what hunting meant. I got to go out with my dad as much as I could. I came home with a lot of empty tags because it was whenever my dad could take me out, and hunting in the wilderness can be hard, it can be tough. And man, when Lee Livingston is your dad, there's times where it shows it can be tough getting up into those hills, and you got to do what you got to do to just be one with that animal. And it made me realize that hunting isn't about the kill. Hunting is about the stalk. It is about the chase. It is about watching these beautiful elk on the side of a mountain and coming off of it and seeing, man, do I take the shot? Do I get a shot? You're lucky if you get a shot. You should be considered lucky if you get a shot. And so that's what I started to really base my ethics and my ideas on hunting is just being out there and being with the animals, seeing what you can do, getting to see these animals migrate and everything. And so around that same time, you're a teenager, you're figuring out what you want to do with your life. I kept looking to my dad and I was like, you get to do this, you get to be one with these animals, you get to chase hard, you get to have fun, you get to experience all these different types of things, all these different types of people. I want to do what you do. And I did. He was stubborn. He told me I had to go off to college, and I went to college and I went for conservation law enforcement, which very happy to have that underneath my belt because it does teach you more into the ethics of the world and how people really think and what people come out here and that kind of stuff. And I went out there, I got that degree, and I came back and I was serious and I was like, I want to be an outfitter. And the journey started and I worked my butt off and I got that license. And so now I'm starting to figure out what my job is. As an outfitter, we're sharing this with the world. We're sharing hunting with the entire world. We're sharing that ethics. We're sharing that respect. We're sharing every nitty-gritty detail sometimes about it. And that is good. That is good. People need to see what we do. So there's definitely been times where ethics are questioned, especially as a guide. You get out there. I remember this one time I had a dad up on the mountain with his son. We were cow hunting. He had a great shot. And he was telling his son to shoot, and I was behind him. And so I didn't have the best call, but the dad kept saying, you need to shoot. You need to shoot. Why aren't you shooting? And then finally the shot went off and it cleared up. I didn't have a view of that cow. I'm not going to just shoot off when there's other things running around. You don't take shots like that. If you're uncomfortable, don't take it. And he waited until he was comfortable, until he had a shot, and he took it. Another thing I ask my hunters when we go out guiding is I always ask them, what are you comfortable with shooting at? He's going back with Christine saying something, they had these long range things. My scope goes out to 1,000 yards. I'm like, that's cool that your scope goes out to 1,000 yards, but can you shoot 1,000 yards? No. I was like, okay, what have you shot your rifle at? What yardage are you comfortable with? Because I am not going to risk you saying I can shoot 1,000 yards or risk an animal's life for it to just run off and go suffer somewhere. I need to know, I need you to be comfortable with your shot. I just need to know this so when we go out there. And they'll tell me, I'm comfortable with 300. Great, 300? That is like the farthest I'm going to let you shoot then. That is the farthest. And I'm typically going to try to get you guys closer because you need to experience the intimacy of being up there and hunting. And sometimes I get questioned. I am a girl in this male-dominated world, like this dominated hunting industry. It's hard. It's going to be hard to make a difference, but just do what you can do. If you know your stuff, you know it. Don't let men or people make you falter from that, because that's all you can do is prove exactly what you can do. And that is how I was raised to do.
I have a question for all of the panelists, but specific to you and in just what you have shared here with the attendees. You have mighty footsteps to follow. You have a mountain of a man that has established this business with an incredible reputation. But how do you, as Alex Livingston, blaze your own trail for Livingston Outfitters and establish yourself, not associated as much with Lee, but as Alex?
I can't lie. There's definitely been times where I have to follow my dad around like a little puppy dog because I don't know anybody, and I'm like, introduce me to that person. I'm young. I have quite a while to make my name and everything, but I want to get out there. I want to be another voice for this industry. I'm sitting up here today, and it was a challenge for me to come sit up here in front of you all today. But I just want to be involved, and I'm not going to make goals. I just want to be involved and help where I can, and that is just for right now what I want to do. So I just want to be a voice. I want to be another voice. I want to be another advocate.
Thank you for tuning in to Wild Things and Wild Places. We hope you enjoyed this first part of our two-part series on the Wyoming Sportsperson Conservation Forum. Be sure to join us next week as we continue our focus on the Celebrating Our Hunting Heritage panel and hear more from Governor Gordon and Brian Nesvik. Stay up to date with us at muleyfanatic.org. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild Things and Wild Places.